Well, hello everyone. This is Robert Whitaker, and it has been a long time. Today is April 1st, 2024. I haven't published a heritage video, and it feels like an eternity. I apologize for that, but I had good reason. Um, I've been doing a lot of work with my job as county commissioner. I've been doing a lot of work with my job at Epica Animal Health. I've been doing a lot of work with my job as CEO of Whitaker Household and Cattle Company and all those things. So forgive me for not publishing for a while, but there's good things in store. Today we have Kesse Richardson. This lady, I have never heard this name in my life, and I should have. Born in 1898, she is a former county clerk and also librarian. She was serving as our county clerk when Hansford County was seated in Old Hansford. She served in the old courthouse. She took notes for years when she was a public servant. And, everything from commissioner court meetings to happenings in the county, the murder of Sheriff Martin, she was around for that when that happened. She talks about the phone system that they had at Old Hansford in the courthouse, which, I thought was extremely fascinating because they had, phones that were all over Old Hansford, crank phones, but they had a direct line to Guyman. So that was the only way out of Old Hansford communication-wise, was to Guyman by phone, or someone got horseback or buggy and went and spread things word of mouth. She talks some about that. She has notes of who were the commissioners in certain years, who was the sheriff in certain years, she's taken these notes over all these years from 1919 to 1950. This is 1 hour and 22 minutes of her memories as a public servant. And in her retired years, she was our librarian here at the the Hansford County Library here in Spearman. She talks about elections to move the county seat from Old Hansford to Spearman. Here's an interesting factoid in her notes. The courthouse down at Old Hansford sold to the city of it sold to Mr. Groover for $600 to be moved to Groover. But essentially it was kind of disassembled and put back together as a community church. I don't know anyone in Groover that's ever told that story that I've heard. So it was interesting. That's the first time I've ever heard that. I never did know what happened to the courthouse down at Old Hansford until now. She also discusses the murders, not only of Sheriff Martin, but also of Ace Borger. And that was when Borger was known as Boogertown, and it was corrupt and full of gangsters and evil people and prostitutes and all of those things. There's a book about it, actually, the Hutchinson County history book that was written. It's by my chair in the living room. I could go grab it right now, but I'm not going to. Speaking of history, speaking of counties, Heritage Days is coming up soon. I'm going to give you kind of a taste of what's in store. We're going to do a cowboy breakfast at the Station Master's House Museum the morning of Heritage Days prior to the parade. From 7:30 in the morning to 9 o'clock in the morning, we're going to have cowboy breakfast at the museum, and we're going to replenish our ranch room with fresh brands, cattle brands. Stay tuned for the details on that. Those are forthcoming. I'm going to announce those once we have all the details hammered out on all of this, they will be announced, and they'll be announced by video and also in writing on Hansford Reporter Statesman, and also on HPO on the High Plains Observer. So, and I'm going to announce them here too. We're as many outlets as we can get. I'm going to stop yakking now because you're not here for me. You need to enjoy this. This is a great listen. If you're driving tractor, if you're on the road, if you're working at your desk, to just listen to her recount these times of her serving in Old Hansford as a county servant. And then, I don't know, it's just fascinating. Have a great day. And again, my apologies for taking so long to publish.
We're going to talk to some early day school teachers from that time later on in this series. Hey, now, May the 12th, is that March the 12th, I guess?
Yes,
19th.
November the 12th.
November the 12th. What happened there? You got $20 for something.
Well, it was $20 was collected for use of courtroom to be sent to the Galveston sufferers. That was when they had that Galveston.
That's when the Galveston flood washed Galveston away.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting to know.
And the county judge was Henson Clark Jones. That's J.W. Jones, which was Gwynford like his daddy.
Father.
And B.O. Cater was sheriff. And H.L. Doyle, he was county treasurer. And Frank Wright was Commissioner 1. And N.D. Crosby 2. Wilson 3. And D.C. Jones 4.
That's of the precincts now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Kesse, you're, that's along the age that you can begin to remember things. Were those people full-time employed there? Did they make a living doing something else and then just...
Well, of course, they had their ranch.
And they just gave their services when the time...
Well, whenever they had a commissioner's court meeting once a month. Sometimes maybe one day and sometimes 2 days.
Now then, let's go back to November 1902. Do you have some notations from that?
Well, J.Y. Grubbs was the clerk, E.A. Hitch was treasurer, Cater sheriff, and Chapel was assessor, Crosby judge, and then Wilson, precinct 1, Charles O'Laughlin, number 2, L.L. Medley, number 3, and J.C. Sangster, number 4.
Now we're beginning to see some names that still are predominant with us now.
Yeah.
That was in 1902. Then what's the next notation?
Well, in 1902, there was an election held, and my dad ran for sheriff against Bill Cater. And Cater got 83 votes, and my dad got 33.
And that's how many votes were cast.
Of course, the women didn't vote in those days.
Oh, now that's another thing. Woman suffrage hadn't come into being at that time. So only half the number of votes you normally would have.
Mm-hmm.
And that must be the first sheriff's race, actually, that we've had in the history of the county.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. And then on down further to 1903. What do you have there? That's August 10th, 1903.
Well, we had advertised for bids to stretch wire around the courthouse yard, build a gate and a water tank outside this fence for people to water their horses. And then there was a larger tank with a float valve in it, and it was...
That was for watering the horses?
This round tank was inside the yard, and that's where the people of Hansford got their water.
And they carried it in buckets, I guess.
Carried it in buckets, and some of us had a barrel on wheels. We'd go down and fill up the barrel and take it home. Especially on wash day.
A little different to what we have for water now.
Right.
Who are some of the names that you have there? I guess you don't have any names there. There's an 8x2x2 something here.
Well, that was your build gate and water tank outside the fence, which was 8x2x2. And lumber to be 2 inches in 2 inches
Yeah.
to be connected with the large tank. And this large tank was inside the fence.
Now, these tanks must have been wood tanks.
They were.
Uh-huh.
And this large tank inside, it had a barrel inserted in the side where the windmill pumped into this barrel, and this barrel overflowed into the tank, and then the tank went out.
You recall what kind of windmills we had in those days?
Eclipse, I think.
Eclipse. Wooden wheels.
Mm-hmm.
How about the next entry you have there, 1903, December the 30th? That's right after Christmas.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Hitch, he resigned as treasurer, and Dr. J. Omer Moore was appointed.
All right, then
Mm-hmm.
next entry is 1904, June 13th. What happened there?
Well, the courthouse had to have some repairs, and Mr. J.E. Foster, he was hired $3 a day to repair re-roof and so forth on the courthouse.
J.E. Foster.
Mhm.
So he's one of our early
He-
carpenters there. And then now you go off to 1904, March the...
1904 now is when we moved from down the creek up to Old Hansford.
That's when your family moved up to Old Hansford.
Mhm.
All right. And who are some of the names there? Who was the judge?
Well, E.C. Hayes, Lloyd Hayes' daddy, was judge,
Uh-huh.
and J.Y. Grubbs was clerk, Bill Cater, sheriff, and E.C. Smith, assessor, and Mr. H.P. Bailey was county treasurer.
H.P. Bailey.
Yeah.
We're beginning to get more names that are still with us.
Now then, this H.P. Bailey, anyway, it's down in my neighborhood, their home, and sold to Bill Gandy. And that's where Bill Gandy lives now.
Uh-huh.
But that house was built after Spearman started. Of course, H.P. Bailey had a little shack like all the rest of us down at Old Hansford.
Now, you have another notation here. What is this?
That's the commissioner, W.O. Douglas, number 1. Number 2 was W.J. Klein. Number 3 was F.C. Wilmoth. And number 4 was J.C. Sangster.
And then you go all the way to 1906.
Well, we had sealed bids to build a bridge and approach across the Paladura there at Old Hansford.
Now, this is real interesting because that Paladura is playing a prominent part in our news today.
Right.
In February 26, 1974. We're still fighting the wars of that bridge. And that's probably the first bridge that's ever put across it, you reckon?
Right, I think so.
And there's a bridge down there now, of course.
Well,
So-
that bridge now down there across the creek is back up the creek. Oh, I guess a quarter or half mile
Uh-huh.
back up the creek from where this bridge was built.
We're going to hurry along here now. On the next page you have, we're still in 1906. There's a lot of notes.
Well, my dad, he was appointed constable of Precinct 1, and J.W. McCoy was
Now, who was your dad, Kesse?
W.E. Caldwell.
W.E. Caldwell.
And I think in this book here you got
That Doc may comprise for us. We've got a picture of here's the first structure built north of the Canadian River, and first post office for Hansford County. And that's a painting by Winfred Lackey.
Yeah.
An early scene of Hansford's Main Street with ground cover of snow. There's the John L. Hayes Mercantile Company.
Yeah,
And
that's the Caldwell Dry Good.
and a Hale Drug Company. We still have had a Hale Drug in Groover until just a few years ago.
Yeah.
Is that the same family?
Well, this Butch
Right.
Hale. Butch Hale was a son of this Hale here.
And then we have P.M.
Mays. Well, now that old corrugated iron building down here on Main Street now,
Yes,
That was moved up from Old Hansford.
And that sign says, "We sell everything."
Mm-hmm.
I imagine they had buggies and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
Now, back to 1906. You have a lot of notations there from 1906. Who were some of the names here?
Well, Mr. Dr. McCoy was the county health officer. And
Notice we had the county physician way back there, and then county doctor, and now it's county health officer.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder what his salary was by that time.
Whatever you could get. Anyway, R.M. Richardson paid $2 for delivering groceries to quarantine camp.
And what was that? Was the smallpox?
That was the smallpox, and that was the McLeods, I think.
And we had a camp of people that had smallpox, and they were quarantined.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know if there were a lot of people that died from that epidemic?
Well, the McLeods lost 2 or 3 children. Not from.
Not from smallpox.
Not from smallpox. No, I don't know whether. Ruth Garner's grandfather, I think. They claimed he had smallpox, but I understand that he had throat trouble that really got him.
And you have some other names here. Somebody got $30 for something.
Well, my brother Simeon, he was allowed $5 for a trip to Stratford in connection with quarantine regulations. I don't know what that meant, but then C.E. Moon, $30 as guard at the quarantine camp.
To keep people out.
Mm-hmm. And then P.M. Mays, $30 for supplies, and Mr. Sparks, $63 for guarding.
Now, is that Sparks, is Raymond Sparks from that family?
Yes.
And he was guard there at the
Mm-hmm.
quarantine camp. Where was the camp?
I really don't know.
Already. And more from 1906. How about skipping down to here? What?
Well, he got 4 tons of coal and a good stove for the use in the court
In the courthouse?
clerk's office.
In the clerk's office. That's when you began to be interested in the clerk thing, I guess.
No,
It was
not
comfortable.
then. Not then.
1907, you have an entry there. What happened there?
Well, the sheriff, he was to buy sufficient seats for the courtroom and repair the courtroom and vault. Now, the vault was in the clerk's office.
Uh-huh. That's where you kept the money. Is that right?
Now, that's where we kept the records, and if there was any money, it went in there too, but...
Until you could take it to Dodge City. I guess by that time, do we have any notations anywhere that gave us a bank any closer than Dodge City? 1907. June, she's looking at those notes now.
I don't know. I skipped too far around here, along with the last.
And then there's August the 12th, 1907. What happened there?
Well, they were collared 4 days guarding attached witness meals and bed for prisoners at Hansford.
That
R.E. Martin, he had board to J.M. Simmons, Lindsay Simmons, 3-day guard prisoners.
So you don't know who any of the prisoners were in those days?
Well, in this case was J.M. Simmons and his son Lindsay
And R.E.
for
Martin was
killing Mr. Aiken.
And do you know what happened to him? Did he have a trial?
Well, I think he finally had a trial, but I don't think Simmons ever
He wasn't convicted.
did.
And then August the 12th, 1907, down here, what happened?
Well, the clerk had the courthouse yard gate repaired. And the gate was to be locked.
So nobody could get in or out.
That was the big gate where you drove in.
All right. Let's skip on down to 1908, Kesse. You have some money involved there, $30 and $3.
Well, there was $30 to W.B. Johnson, Sheriff of Hemphill County, for 30 days board to J.M. Simmons, prisoner.
He must have
From
been
Hansford
moved
County.
from Hansford County.
Well, there was no jail in Hansford County to put him.
So he was moved over to Ochiltree County. Was that Ochiltree County?
What, Canadian? Hemphill
Hemphill
County?
County.
That's
He moved all the way to
Canadian.
Canadian, yes. Okay. And 1908, you have something else.
Well, Mr. Bob Hayes, he was allowed $3 for trip to Berto Cater's ranch to notify him of the murder of George Akins.
So that gives an idea there's very little communication except just
Right.
person to person at that time. And skipping way on down to, is that June the 11th?
June the 8th.
June the... Must have been some people taking up free office space.
Not exactly.
What, do you know what the occasion was?
Well, they had all their dances and church and school and everything else.
So they had to
and
move
they
them
had to move them all out.
All right. And we're still on 1908.
Well, Ross Richardson was paid $2.25 for 27 rabbit scalps.
We had a bounty on rabbits then, huh? Jackrabbits, I suppose.
Yes.
And August 11th, 1908.
Well, 1908, the clerk was ordered to buy lumber and employ carpenters to build a new water closet in the courtyard for county use. You know what a water closet is, don't you?
I think so.
The three-holer.
That's right. And October the 2nd, 1908. These are records that Kesse Richardson has taken note of that come from the courthouse records. They're still there, but I think they're very interesting. Let's go on down to 1909, Kesse, because we're going to have to hurry along here to get you to your appointment.
This was when Dr. Deacon was appointed county health officer.
And do you know?
And the clerk advertised for bids to erect a new windmill over the county well, right in the courthouse yard.
This is still at Old Hansford.
Mm-hmm.
When did we move to Spearmint? Do you have any records pertaining to that? There are lots and lots of rich names, rich lore here in these records. And she's trying to find the time when we moved. Do you know what year it was?
When what?
When we moved to Spearmint.
Well,
Moved the courthouse and the town.
well, the first moved out of Old Hansford was in 1919.
1919. Well, let's go back here. 1918 was when you became district clerk, was it not?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
1920.
1920.
I was county treasurer at that time.
And all right, now let's read some names there. Who?
Well, that's J. Agnes Brown. He resigned.
What was he? The county judge?
Well, he was elected county judge in
1917.
17 when he ran against Mr. Hale. And he resigned before the court disposed of business. And then
This was during the First World War. And some of these people may have been going to fight for their country.
yeah, and then B.B. Andrews, he was appointed as a judge after Brown
resigned.
Mm-hmm.
And then in July 1918, what do you have at the top here? Just don't tear that. She's going to tear it anyhow. What do you have there?
Well, different ones of the commissioners resigning and somebody else appointed.
This was an unsettled time because of World War I, I'm sure.
And Mr. Charles Beck was appointed commissioner of Precinct 2 to fill a vacancy caused by resignation of J.I. Stew. And this Charles C. Beck is Ms. Elmo McClellan's daddy.
Mrs. Elmo McClellan's daddy. So we're getting down into some names we can begin to recognize are still here.
Then B.B. Andrews, this is in August of 18. B.B. Andrews resigned as county judge, and Roy Stores was 1918. Mr. V.R. Wilbanks drilled a new well, erected a new tower, then placed in the mill. $1.25 per foot for drilling, $25 for building and erecting tower, and $3 for pulling piping out of the old well.
He got rich, didn't he? And this September the 23rd, 1918.
He was ordered to pay $500 to the sheriff to hire competent Secret Service man to investigate the attempted poisoning. Oh, let's don't go into that.
All righty. Now then, November the 11th, 1918. That's a very historic date. What happened there in Hansford County?
Well, the candidates of the election was District Judge W.R. Ewing. District Attorney was Marion Reynolds. County Judge Roy Stores. County Attorney C.D. Works. Clerk R.L. McClellan. Sheriff Wilbanks.
That's Hitch Wilbanks.
Mm-hmm.
And
assessor was W.L. Barkley. Treasurer. No, assessor was W.L. Barkley, which was an uncle of Freeman Barkley.
Freeman Barkley. And
treasurer was me.
And you were the treasurer in 1918.
Mm-hmm.
Now, something else happened on that day, Kesse. You must remember that. November the 11th, 1918.
I know. Tried to forget it.
That's Armistice Day.
I know.
And was there much, do you recall much excitement around here at that time? Was this country involved, this county involved?
Well, we had several. Now, Jess Hayes, he was in the service. That's Floyd Hayes' brother. And then there was Mrs. Orville Walker in Spivey. He was killed overseas.
There, I imagine the names are down here on the courthouse.
Probably,
plaque,
yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm.
Then February the 10th, 1919, the war was over, and what?
Well, Roy Stores, he resigned as county judge, and Mr. A.E. Townsend was appointed judge.
Now, in a period of 1 year there, we had 3 resignations for county judge.
Right.
Do you recall what was happening there? Was the heat in the kitchen pretty hot? Or,
well, I don't know. They just wanted to do something else, I think, mostly.
And it didn't pay enough.
This B.V. Andrews, he had a hardware store here in Skirman.
May the 12th, 1919, you have a notation.
Well, Sid Lockey was appointed cattle inspector.
It's interesting to note that in 1918 we had a county attorney. And I guess that's the first one we had.
Yeah, C.D. Works.
Uh-huh.
And if you ever ask him anything, he said, well, I'll have to look it up.
That's a good answer. September the 25th, 1919. Somebody got $1.60 for something.
$121.60 paid to Sheriff Wilbanks as expense incurred in conveying Myrtle Falls to the Wichita Falls.
And then October the 11th, 1919. Almost a year after the war was over.
Okay. The sheriff is requested to see that all auto owners of Hansford County pay the registration and tax and place numbers on the cars.
Do you happen to have any of those early day tags?
No.
I wonder, wouldn't that be interesting to have some of those? Then March 1919, March the 10th.
Well, March the 10th, 1919, Russell Grader Company for grading and elevating a road from Old Hansford to Spillman, I guess. Anyway, he had a Twin City 40 horsepower gas tractor.
And it would go, it had big old iron lugs, didn't it? To spin down and bury itself. That stuff. Then, is this...
And then Leo Dacus, he was to take charge and operate this road engine.
And that's the first county road machine we had.
Mm-hmm.
That's in 1919.
Mm-hmm. And then in 1920, February, the clerk purchased a Ford truck with solid tires to be used by a road grader crew.
Solid tires.
Mm-hmm.
What were the roads like then? Did we have any paving at all?
Cow trails.
All right. And was Hansford being moved to Spearman at that time, 1920?
Yeah, I think they started out late 1919.
Now for the record.
To move the county seat from Hansford to Spearman.
Well, what was here at Spearman that attracted the...
Well, the railroad came
The railroad, okay. That's what I wanted to get in there, because there was no other reason to be moving.
No.
That's a beautiful sight down there with Hansford.
Well, they always said that the railroad people said they couldn't come up the creek to Old Hansford.
And so
So they
Old
built-
Hansford came to the railroad.
Mm-hmm.
And a fellow by the name of Spearman actually, I think, plotted the layout of the town.
Yeah.
That's how it got its
I
name.
don't know whether-
We had a letter from Mrs. Spearman several years ago and tried to get her to come back for one of our celebrations, but she didn't feel up to it. But the street of her name is Bernice, and I don't know if she's still living now, but the street of Bernice was named for her.
Yeah. Anyway, where are we in 1920? The election district attorney, E.J. Pickens, this old gal Kazoo was the clerk,
Uh-huh.
and Hicksville Banks was sheriff.
You had a separate tax assessor collector to what, the sheriff has always been the collector, but you had a separate tax office for the assessor.
Right.
And just recently those offices were divided again, and we have a assessor collector separately from the sheriff's
Mhm.
office. That's just done just recently.
Yeah.
Last November, I think. Then you have what? I can't read your notes there. I'm reading upside down. Is this June the 6th, 1921?
Mhm.
And what happened there?
Return of officers elected for town of Spearman. Officers as mayor.
Who was the mayor? Was this the first mayor?
Yeah, H.E. James was mayor. And marshal was E.L. Bird. Alderman, Fred Brand, B.D. Andrews, R.L. McClellan, W.R. Massey, and M.C. Head.
Is this Lee McClellan?
Mhm.
Yeah, now, was an alderman way back in those days.
Mhm.
That's in 1921.
Mm-hmm.
And he later held an office. Now, we've come through most of your notes here. No, we've got some more.
Oh, we ain't got home after them yet, but
We're up to the year of 1921, and Kesse, we're 30 minutes past your appointed date that you had. I don't know what gentleman you had a date with this one, but you...
well, I'm not. Pardon me. I'm not talking.
But
I'm
we'll
like
get
the
you-
little kid that made the mark on the wall, and Mama said, "Where'd that come from?" Me ain't talking.
Now, we'll get you back later to complete these records and get them up to modern times, because I think those names are highly important, and the things that happened there. It's interesting to note that by 1919 we had a county attorney.
Mhm.
In 1921 we had a district attorney. And then in 1921 the city of Spearman was formally organized, and our first mayor, and we've gotten those in there. The very first mayor of the city of Spearman, what was his name? Hayes? She's going to read it again.
James,
James.
H.E. James, he was with the First State Bank, or Gruber State, no.
It was
Anyway, as a
Guarantee-
bank, Guarantee State.
I believe
Either
it.
is the Guarantee State or the First State now, I don't remember.
And he was the first mayor of Spearman.
Mhm.
And the alderman there, one is still living, Lee McClellan. There may be others still living, I don't know. But Lee
Mhm.
McClellan was one of the aldermen.
Yeah, as far as I know, Lee McClellan's the only one that's alive.
Of the first commissioners of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll be back with Kesse Richardson on another date to complete this for the archives of the library. And we'd like to say our guest this morning has been Kesse Richardson, who has very patiently recorded notations from the minutes of the courthouse records from back as far as 1890.
No.
what was the
1889.
1889, which is quite a ways back, 85 years ago. And we'll complete this on another program. Today's program has been brought to you by Baker and Taylor Drilling Company, and tomorrow we have another lady as our guest who's going to relive some of the early days in the farming industry. Dita Blodgett's going to be our guest, and we're looking forward to it. Hope you'll be with us. Until then, this is Coy Palmer, hoping you have a very fine day. Good morning, everyone. Our guest again this morning is Kesse Richardson. We didn't get through with all of Kesse's notes that she had taken from the many years of the court proceedings in the courthouse at Hansford County. And Kesse, it's real nice of you to come back to see us this morning. I understand that you wanted to make a correction or two from the last tape that we made.
Right.
And we'll make that. Our program is brought to you by Baker and Taylor Drilling Company, who are always first in helping to better Spearman, make it a better place to live. They're good for the economy, good for Spearman. And Kesse, what was that correction you wanted to make? We'll get that in right now.
Well, it was a correction where the it was organized, and the counties that was cut off from Wheeler County.
There was one Wheeler County which covered a big expanse of the Panhandle.
Right. And the counties that was cut off at that time was Hansford, Lipscomb, Ochiltree, Hemphill, and Roberts.
Quite a few counties out of one.
There was 5 counties that were cut off at the time. And all the court affairs that were, taken to Mobile, county seat
That's where the
of Wheeler.
one trial was.
Yes. And
you spoke of they had one jail down there, and all the people took their prisoners to that place.
right.
And you mentioned an old timer that still has descendants here that was served on the pettit jury there. That was Doc Hale, or his dad or his granddad.
No, it was Mel Wright, who is the granddaddy of Wright Hale.
Uh-huh. Well, that's where I got the name Hale. Mel Wright was the granddaddy of Wright Hale, who presently is today
the picture show.
March the 5th.
Mm-hmm.
Is this March the 5th?
Yes.
In 1974. Kesse Richardson, who served many, many years in the courthouse in one office or another, and the last office she held was district clerk and county clerk's office for many years, is our guest this morning. We'll be back and take up where we left off the other day when we were talking to Kesse in the year of 1922, I believe, right after this message from Baker and Taylor Drilling. Of course, you can never cover, unless we took weeks and weeks painstakingly, all the details of the history of our area here, but Kesse Richardson is very graciously sharing her notes with us, and we're hitting high spots. And we had gotten to as far as 1921 or 1922, the last time Kesse was our guest. Today we're going to try to get up to present time, which means we're going to hit a lot of high spots. What happened in 1921 or 22, as your notes say here, Kesse?
Well, I think we went into that 21, didn't we?
I believe so.
Where they was going to remove the county seat from Hansford to
Spearman. Uh-huh. And
And
was that done by election?
Yes, and they held an election, and the returns was returned on January the 26th, 1922, in court vacation.
And
of course, Spearman lost their election that time.
Spearman did.
Yes.
And who kept the courthouse then?
Hansford kept the courthouse.
Hansford kept it. Well, that's interesting. I thought it moved at the time Spearman moved.
Well, it says here that we had 277 for Spearman and 157 for remaining at Hansford.
And did you have to have a 2/3 majority?
Right.
And so, a total of how many people were voting then?
434, I believe.
And they liked 34 votes having enough to carry. So Hansford kept the courthouse, and Spearman moved to the railroad.
Right.
And what happened then? Did they have another election soon?
Oh, yeah, they had another election sometime down here.
Well, let's follow your notes here. We'll get to that election. The courthouse was in a wooden building, I believe, in Hansford, wasn't it?
No, it was a brick building.
Brick building.
Mm-hmm. With a full-size basement, which was rocked.
And it had the jail in the basement, I believe.
Well, they had 2 cells down there, but they were never used.
Why was that?
Well, they found out that it didn't come up to health.
Wouldn't pass the health standard.
Right.
All right. And what else do you have here now?
Well, I didn't get anything else until November of 22, when Dr. Gibner was appointed health officer of Hansford County. And then, of course, we had an election that year.
Was that for the purpose of trying to move the courthouse again?
No, that was the election of officers
For the county?
for the county.
And who was elected?
Well, district judge was Mr. Ewing, who lived at Canadian, and district judge. And J.A. Holmes, he was our district attorney. And the county judge was Mr. Townsend, A.E. Townsend, who was the granddaddy of Russell Townsend.
Russell Townsend's granddad was county judge.
Yes. And, of course, this Kesse Richardson, whoever she is, she was elected as county and district clerk.
Began to come into the picture then.
Yes.
How old were you at that time, Kesse? You remember?
Well, I was in 22. Oh, I was about 25, I guess, 24, 25.
You were born before the turn of the century then?
Yes.
Uh-huh. All right. And you were elected district and county clerk?
Yes. And Alvina Richardson, he was elected as county tax collector and sheriff.
Oh, and sheriff.
Mm-hmm.
He was sheriff and tax collector.
Mm-hmm.
Was that your husband at that time?
Well, in November of 22, yes. No. Mm-mm. No.
Just a boyfriend at that time.
Well, just a friend that we've known each other for a number of years.
Uh-huh.
And then there was assessor was Mr. R.W. Thompson. And he still has some folks around here, but I don't, they're out of Gruber Way.
He
I
was the
forgot.
tax assessor then?
Yes. And the county treasurer was Mrs. Buchanan.
And
Ms. Buchanan is mother of Helen Fisher and J.B. Buchanan.
So we're getting closer to home now to where we're...
And then our county attorney was Fred Hill. He came in here after Spearman started.
Uh-huh.
And the commissioners was, we call him Gray Sparks. He was J.G.B. Sparks.
Is this Raymond Sparks' dad?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And Mr. C.C. Beck, he was a commissioner of Precinct 2, which is Mrs. Elmo's daddy and Mrs. Jarvis' daddy.
That's Mrs. Elmo McClellan Sr.?
Yes. And then Mr. R.E. Brooks, he was a commissioner of Precinct 3. I don't believe there's any of his folks around anymore. And O.C. Dowdy was commissioner of Precinct 4. And that is the daddy of, he's got 2 girls. Mrs. Hedgecote lives down in Hudson County now, was one of them, and I can't recall the other one's name.
Now, this was in what year?
1922, election.
1922.
Mm-hmm.
And that took care of all the officers then?
Yes.
At that time. You mentioned Judge Ewing. There was a district judge that lived at Pampa for years. I wonder if that would have been the same Judge Ewing.
I don't know. Might have been his brother. I don't know.
We won't belate that point. Now, what's their next step?
Well, in January of 23, the sheriff ordered to go out and pick all the county tools and machinery and bring all of it down to the courthouse.
And where was the courthouse?
At Old Hansford.
At Old Hansford at that time. And still hadn't moved the courthouse, but
Oh, no.
were the people who were serving in the capacity of county officers living in Spearman, driving to Old Hansford?
Well, some of them lived in Spearman, but I guess Alvina and I were the only ones that lived.
You lived at Old Hansford then?
I lived at Old Hansford, yes, and Alvina had a ranch about, I guess, a mile south and west of Hansford.
And that's Alvina Richardson?
Yes.
The sheriff?
Uh-huh. And then the next thing happened.
Let's pause just a minute there. What kind of communications did you have in the courthouse? Did you have telephones at that time?
Well, yes. That goes back to about 1909, I guess, when my daddy put in a telephone exchange, you might call it now.
Uh-huh.
And it had 10 drops, what we call drops.
Yes.
10
and
lines.
You had to have a central that stayed on duty.
Yes.
And
then besides the one that took care of the county, we had a direct line to Guyman. And we could connect people on the switchboard to the Guyman line.
Would that be a toll call?
No, they didn't call it a toll call. It just.
Do you remember what the charge was for having a telephone?
No, I don't.
But he had to keep up all the lines and
yes.
that sort of thing.
And a lot of those lines run on barbed wire fence.
And at times they didn't get too good service.
Right. And then there was so many on the line that if they was trying to talk long distance, well, they had to try to get these people on the line to hang up.
That was the chief source of entertainment in those days.
Right. You had to listen on.
Get on the party line. I think there was a classic statement made in our community. This might shock a few people, but there were two ranchers talking, and of course everyone had their receiver down.
Oh, yes.
And one of the ranchers said, "All you people on the line might as well hang up. We're going to talk about the bulls for a while."
Well, that reminds me, Mother was at the store, of course our telephone exchange, or whatever you want to call it, was in the store. And my mother was at the store one day, and of course she had a customer, and the telephone rang. Well, of course she was a little late getting to answer, and it was Mr. A.E. Powers calling in. And she answered, and he said, "By golly, the time he was getting to that." My mother said, "Well, by golly, you better be careful who you're talking to."
She could always hang up, couldn't she? And you wouldn't have any recourse there.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You don't remember what they paid, though. You know?
No.
This was the old crank telephone.
Right.
And Central cranked, too, didn't she? When she patched cords in, she would twist a little thing and crank. And everything was done with a magneto that charged
something, I don't know, I don't remember.
Down the line.
Yeah.
And the more power you had, the more you could use barbed wire fences. Okay, the next set of notes?
Well, let's see. We gathered up all the tools, and then the sheriff built a box building down there to store this stuff in. And put a lock and key on it.
And they moved all the equipment back to Old Hansford.
Mm-hmm. And then the roadmen, whenever they wanted anything, they had to come down.
You don't suppose anybody had been using that equipment for other than county use, do you? Was that?
What do you think?
Do you think that might have been the reason they moved it back down to Old Hansford?
Well, I remember one time after Rich was in the sheriff's office, they come up missing two, I call them slips. They were...
Yes, I know what you mean. They moved dirt with.
Yeah. And come up missing, and Rich traced them down, and they was over in Oklahoma, and he went over there and got them.
People were just borrowing them and then borrowing them and passing them on.
Forgetting to bring them back. Just like borrowing a cup of sugar and forget to take it back.
I think for anyone that might not have lived in those days, a slip was a big giant scoop that was pulled by one team of horses, and one man operated it, had handles on the back, and you could lift up on the handles and make it dig into the dirt until it filled up full of dirt. Then you could push down on the handles and it would slide. It was a heavy slide, and the team could pull it to wherever you wanted to dump it. And it was hard work.
Sometimes they had more than two horses or mules. Sometimes they had four.
Yeah,
and they had Fresno.
Had a Fresno, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And I helped build a road bed between Allen Reed and LaForce one time with 4 wild mules. And if you think that's not a job, you got to
Well, that first road that was built from Hansford to Spearman was built with those.
That's right. That's about all. You
Mhm.
plow up the dirt so that you
Mhm.
could pick it up with a slip or Fresno,
Mm-hmm.
pull it up on the road bed and dump it, and get it above the water line.
Yeah.
All right, now you have the next set of notes there.
Well, in February of 23, the sheriff had to buy some chairs and cots and blankets, and he had a cedar chest built to keep those blankets in.
Were these for
These were,
keeping the prisoners warm?
yes. And if they had court, why, they had these cots and blankets for the jury to use.
And, of course, the cedar chest was to keep the moths out of the blankets.
Yes.
Well, that's
And
interesting.
let's see.
You have a notation of August 11th, 1924.
Well, that we had an auditor, Mr. Oglesby. He audited the county that from August 1920 until August 24.
You happen to know where he was from?
Amarillo, I believe.
There was a family of Oglesbys around Booker, and I was wondering if it might be that street.
And he was paid $400 for that job.
For auditing. How long did it take him?
Oh, he was down there quite a long while.
A month or so.
Oh, yes. Going from 20 to 24.
That's quite a job then.
Yeah.
Did he find the books in order?
Yes.
Let's turn on over now to your next page. We're going to have to hurry, or we're going to have another session, and I hate to impose on you. Like
In
1924.
24, we had another election.
Was this a county
A
election?
county election, and county judge was C.W. King. He was elected as our judge. And Mattie Davis was his daughter.
Mattie Davis was
C.W. King's daughter.
Now, who is she? What?
Well, Jimmy Davis.
Jimmy Davis's wife.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now we're getting down to modern times.
Mm-hmm.
Now, who was the county and district clerk? Did you get
Well,
beat in that election?
No, I didn't run.
You didn't?
I had married, and I didn't run. And J.E. Womble was elected as county and district clerk.
And C.D. Womble was the attorney?
No, C.D. Works
Works.
was the attorney.
As a county attorney?
Yes.
And the sheriff?
Was Alvina Richardson. And the assessor was Ms. Bessie Cater. And there's quite a few of those around.
Now,
And Ms. Buchanan was elected as county treasurer.
county treasurer. And
And
J.G.B. Sparks.
Sparks was Commissioner 1, Beck 2, and P.B. Higgs was elected as Commissioner Precinct 3, and Homer Cluck was in Precinct 4. And of course, all those Clucks out at Gruber
Are related to him.
are related to him.
Uh-huh. And that's most interesting. Then when did we move the courthouse?
Oh, it was in 9?
Still a long ways off yet.
Well, in 27 we had another election to move
the courthouse.
Move the courthouse from Hansford to Gruver or Spearman. Gruver entered into it in 27.
Uh-huh.
And Spearman got 654 votes. Gruver got 307, and Hansford got 33.
So it didn't move then.
No,
Had to have 2/3 majority.
right. And then they had a contest on Box 1.
Box
Spearman.
one was
Spearman. Mhm.
They had to recount the votes.
I don't think anything ever happened to that.
Because
then-
they didn't have enough votes anyhow.
And then in 27, they had another petition to remove the courthouse from Hansford to Spearman. And that was held on August the 6th, 27.
Now, you see, this is bearing the woes that Hansford County suffered in trying to settle a final place for the courthouse, but most of the counties in this area had the same problems. Gray County had it.
Well, Ochiltree had it too.
Ochiltree had the same problem, and Hutchinson County had the same problem. And it's when you look at the situation right now, you think, how in the world did Stinnett ever get the courthouse away from Borger?
Well,
At the time
Borger,
that was built, Borger was just starting, and Stinnett outweighed him in population.
and they moved the courthouse from Plymouth to Stinnett.
That's right, and at the same time voted up bond issue to build such a building that they never could practically move the courthouse again. And so Borger drives to Stinnett for court.
Mm-hmm.
And that was over $1 million courthouse at the time it was built, which was back in the 30s, early 30s. And I've heard a lot of, nearly every time that you have this kind of an election, it causes a split in feelings of the
Oh,
people,
yes,
hard
yes,
feelings.
yes.
And we're just now recovering from that in
We
Hansford.
sure are, and I'm so glad.
Same thing happened in Pampa. There were ill feelings throughout the county, in Gray County, and also in Hutchinson County, and I suppose in Ochiltree County.
Well,
So
I don't know.
hopefully we're recovering from those
Yes.
wounds. Now, what's your next notation you want to mention?
Well, in 27, they had another election to move from Hansford to Spearman.
And what happened there? Did that one carry or lose? Casey's studying her notes now.
Well, in that time, the election carried for Spearman.
This time.
Mhm.
You know what the vote was?
No, I don't have that down.
But it did move to Spearman.
Yes.
And now that was a brick building down there. Did they take any of the bricks off and move them?
No.
What
No,
happened
they
to
sold the courthouse to Gruber,
They sold it to Groover.
and they built a community church with the brick from the courthouse.
From the courthouse. Is that church still over there? Do you
No, they have torn it down, and Mr. Bort, I believe, lives on the corner where
where that church was?
church was.
And then how soon did they build a building here in Spearman for the courthouse? Evidently the one we have now was built at that time. And while you're looking there, if you can find the contractor that built it, that'd be interesting. Casey doesn't have that at her fingertips right now. What are the notations you have here, Casey?
Well,
Casey.
well, well, in January of 28, they employed an attorney, F.W. Fisher, to institute and prosecute such proceedings as, in his opinion, are available and expedient to the end that final judgment of district court and appeal court may be obtained determining the legal location of the county seat of Hansford County.
And to make it final, I guess.
Mhm.
Now,
And then they went into a contract for the building of the courthouse.
because see, when they moved the court records, they evidently moved them before they got a building built.
Yeah,
Where did they put them?
well, Jess Womble had the clerk's office over in the old hall.
Where it's torn down now.
Yeah,
Where it
it's-
was.
yeah.
In fact,
And
Red Jarvis has a law firm.
yeah,
there now.
yeah. And I guess the sheriff and tax collector, I guess you found him wherever you found him.
Probably at his house.
I don't know. Seemed like it was in the schoolhouse someplace, but I don't know.
Now, see, when they moved those records, did they have an armed guard to move them?
No.
Well-
They went down there with a truck or something and dumped them in there and moved them.
Did they have any, did they move them at night? I remember when they moved the court records
You know, I don't know.
from La Force to Pampa, they took a truck and put several armed men on the truck, and just in case they had trouble. They didn't have any, but there were 7 or 8 men that rode on the sat on the edges of that truck bed
Mm-hmm.
and with shotguns.
Oh,
And they moved the records that way
yeah.
and put them in the the basement of a Baptist church there.
Mhm.
And that's where the courthouse records stood until they got a building.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, I guess they were not centrally located in any one building.
No.
Uh,
Then in 28, well, they had this Oglesby to
audit the books.
audit the books again.
So actually, officially, the courthouse was moved to Spearman in 1927. And then 28, I guess, they started building the building. Do you know when this building was completed that we presently are in? She's looking at notes to try to verify that. We won't pin you down to that. Let's go ahead
I
and
don't
do notes
know.
here. What are your notes right here now? April the 25th, 1929.
Well, my gosh. There was another election for, well, this was, I don't know,
For
in 29 was for the removal of the county seat from Hansford to Spearman. And,
Well, maybe the 27 failed
yeah, and 27 failed, and then they voted again
in 29.
in 29, and then they canceled, they canvassed the election on April the 25th, 29, and there was 876
From Spearman.
for Spearman, and Hansford 13, and Gruber had 399.
So they got the two-thirds majority.
So they got the two-thirds amendment.
And that's when it officially moved.
And then the sheriff was ordered and directed to remove from Hansford to Spearman all seals of the offices, books, records, documents, papers, furniture, fixtures, equipment, and all kind of paraphernalia of that kind.
Now, in 1929, in May of 29, you have the first...
First session of the Commissioner's Court, and there was no quorum.
no quorum.
On account of number 4 and number 3, they
Didn't show up.
didn't show up.
That's when the ill feeling started then. That was,
This is when the ill feeling started, or where they removed the courthouse from Hansford.
and so they were boycotted then.
Yeah.
And then August the 12th, 1929, what was done there? A motion by Sparks that I'm reading upside down. What?
Well, on August 29th, it was Commissioner's Court. Notation here that the Commissioner's Court of Hansford County provide suitable offices for the officers of Hansford County, that is, for county judge, county and district clerk, sheriff, county treasurer. And then on that motion, it failed.
Failed to carry.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, motion failed for a reason there was no second.
no second to the motion.
Mm-hmm.
Who made the motion?
Well, I don't believe it says here. Who made it.
I believe it
Oh,
says
motion by Sparks, yeah.
All right, then November 1930.
Motion by Beck and second by McCree to disallow bill for $900 for rent on City Hall for 18 months used as a county courthouse in the city of Springfield.
The city wanted some rent money and the county wouldn't pay it.
I guess so. But anyway, that motion carried.
And they didn't pay the rent then.
Yeah, they paid it.
I thought it said to disallow.
Disallow. No, it didn't carry. I mean, it carried that they disallowed
They
it.
didn't pay the rent.
Mm-hmm.
And then, do you have another notation there? We'll go
Well,
ahead.
voting on this was Beck, McCree, and Winder. They voted to disallow.
To disallow
And
the
that just left Mr. Sparks and the judge to,
and they were outvoted then.
they were outvoted.
That's in the commissioner's court.
Yeah.
Had we built a building? No, I'm sure we hadn't built a building at that time.
Then we had a general election.
For county judge, C.W. King.
Yeah, that goes on down. That was the general election for a county judge. Was Mr. King, and J.H. Broadhurst was county attorney, And Womble was a clerk. Hicks Wilbanks was sheriff and tax collector, and Mrs. Bessie Gator, which is the mother of, Josie Hayes was one of her daughters, and Vina Hop, she's another daughter, and then
And Barney Sparks was county treasurer.
yeah, he beat Mrs. Buchanan.
And then,
And then the commissioners were Sparks, Beck, McCree, and Winder.
and then
November the 25th, 1930, they employed an architect to prepare plans and specifications and supervise construction of the courthouse for Hansford County.
And who was the architect, you know?
Well, accept plans and specifications of, Towns, Lightfoot, and Funk, architects of Amarillo, to erect and construct courthouse and Spearman.
They were the contractors as well as the...
Then advertised for bids for construction and equipment of the courthouse, and that contract was let to George L. Simpson.
And when was that? 1931?
1930.
1930.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have a notation there in 1931.
Well, they accepted bids of KREIPKE Construction Company of Oklahoma City for construction of the courthouse at the sum of $41,449. And the general contract, plumbing, heating, and wiring, complete. And
that was the whole total building for $41,000. You could build maybe one office down there for that now, couldn't you?
Yeah.
And that was in 1931. The
Yeah.
Depression was on.
Oh, yes. And then the Groover Community Church at Groover by Mr. L.H. Groover, who is still living, lives in Groover. He bid $600 in cash for the old courthouse building.
And was he the high bidder?
Mm-hmm.
And so they moved that building to Groover.
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
Now in 1931, July.
well, they paid Mr. T.O. James for surveying out the cemetery down
That was a $100 fee.
here. Mm-hmm.
And in 1932,
Well, they, way back there in 1916, the county treasurer then, Kesse Richardson, was a treasurer, and she issued a check to Mr. J.A. Riley, who is an uncle of, what's his name here? Riley.
Earl Riley?
Earl Riley. And paid him a sum of $4.08 to cover a check that I had given to Mr. Riley in 1916, and he found that check back here.
He had never cashed it then.
He had never cashed it.
So you
And
made it so
then-
good.
Then in 1932, which was 16 years later,
You issued
Mr.
another check.
I didn't issue it, no, but the court authorized the treasurer to issue a new check to cover this for rabbit scalps.
For rabbit scalps. Now that's most interesting. And he'd somehow or other misplaced that check
Yeah.
and never cashed it.
I had never cashed it.
Now in 1932 in November, you had to
Well, that was,
canvass the election return.
yeah.
And who was elected there?
Well, E.J. Pickens was county judge, elected county judge. And W.L. McConnell was elected district attorney.
County attorney or district attorney?
District attorney. And I see Holmes was killed down here while he was district clerk.
That was when Borger began to really break open.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And McConnell, he was elected in 32 for district attorney. And Sheriff Wilbanks, Womble was the clerk. And then Mrs. Harbison,
Was county treasurer.
county treasurer, she ran against Barney Sparks. and beat him. And Miss Bessie Cater was the assessor. And Broadhurst was judge. And the attorney was Mr. P.B. Carroll.
That's the
Carroll.
County attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it was about that time that Borger was put under martial law. Do you
Yeah.
recall that?
Mm-hmm.
And such things as this Mr. Holmes being killed down there were the things that
And
brought it on.
I don't think they ever prosecuted anybody for killing him. I don't think they ever found out who did it.
Sheriffs were not very healthy in those days. There were 2 or 3 sheriffs killed in Hutchinson County
Oh,
during that time.
I know that. No, I don't know.
If they didn't agree to the so-called underworld, they did away with them. And one of them was killed in broad open daylight, I recall.
Oh,
They just walked up and shot him right on the street. Said we're in charge, and I
well,
think
wonder
it was
what
that
he-
incident.
wonder what his name was.
I don't know, but shortly after that, Ace Borger was killed in the post office,
Mm.
and he was, I believe, the mayor of Borger at the
Oh.
time. And I knew Ace's brother real well. He lived at Stinnett, but shortly after that incident, I think, is the one that brought martial law. They
Yeah.
just couldn't govern themselves for a while.
Mhm.
And were you in Borger at the time they had martial law?
No.
They did it with National Guard youngsters, and they were youngsters, 16 to 18 years old, and there were 4 or 5 on every intersection. There'd be one at each corner of the intersection, and then one out in the middle, and all of them had rifles. And believe me, they had orders to shoot to kill, and people respected those kids.
Yeah.
Borger became a law and order city pretty fast.
Yeah.
Now back to Hansford County in 1932. You have
1932, Miss Bessie Cater was elected assessor, and that was in November. And Mrs. Cater passed away, and Vina Hayes, which is now Mrs. Hopp, lives over in Sherman County. She was appointed assessor, but she failed. She didn't want it.
Uh-huh.
She refused it. So then they appointed Buster Cater, or L.J. Cater, which lived at Gruber. He was appointed as assessor in place of Ms. Cater. And his bond was approved in January of 33. Then in 34 they appointed Doc Jones as county health officer.
Doc Jones,
That's Winfred Lackey's brother.
Winfred Lackey's brother, and is living today.
No,
All right.
no, he was the daddy of this girl that compiled this book of Search for Opportunity.
And she did a fine job of compiling a lot of information.
Yeah, and then in March, the Wilson Funeral Home was allowed $80 for the burial of the Birdwell children who were burned in a fire here at Spearman.
And so we had tragedies happening here at that time.
Yeah, and in 34, May of 34, Mr. Beck resigned as Commissioner of Precinct 3, and V.H. or Vic Ogle was appointed to fill his unexpired term. And then, of course, in 34 we had another general election, and there was Pickens district judge, and McConnell district attorney, Broadhurst was county judge, and the county attorney was Travis Lackey, who lived, he came from Hutchinson County anyway. And the district clerk was elected Fred J. Hoskins in 1934.
This is getting up to just 40 years ago now.
And Hicksville Banks, of course, is sheriff and tax collector. And Mrs. Harbison was the treasurer. And Finus Mays, F.W. Mays, who is an uncle of Don.
Don Mays.
And V.H. Ogle was commissioner, and Gus Olson over in the Oslo community. was commissioner, and Mr. Cluck was commissioner of Precinct 4.
And that was in 34. Now in 35, had we built the courthouse by this time?
Yeah.
You don't have the notes there as to
No, no, I don't think so. Anyway, in September of 1935, they created Hansford County Wind Erosion Conservation District.
This was when Roosevelt had all of the wind erosion programs in fact. We had the CC camps, and or CCC camps, I guess that's what they call it. But youngsters out of homes that were having tough times.
Yeah, I had two nephews that were in CC camps.
And some of the trees along the highways today are a result of that. And the windbreaks, you can go along, well, we have a lot of them here in Hansford County, and people can see those. And that, the Hansford County created this Wind Erosion Conservation District. And that's when federal government began to trickle down and come back to places like Hansford County. That's interesting.
Now then, in August, Mr. Broadhurst, he resigned as county judge, and they appointed Mr. A.F. Barkley, which is Freeman Barkley's daddy.
And
then in November of 36, we had the general election again, and county judge was Mr. Barkley. And now then, that is when they combined the sheriff, assessor, and collector.
Now that's a historical note because that was done in 1936, and it stayed that way until
recently,
1973. I think when November of '73, or was it this year?
It was this.
In '74.
It was after J.B. passed away.
Yes.
And R.L. McFarland took over.
That's right.
And then this had been,
I believe it was in
it
November.
being discussed long time before that, but it finally came to a head.
And finally was voted on and passed. I think November '73. So all of those years, the two offices were combined, and now it's once again separate. Any interesting notes there?
Well, now then, May Jones, which is Herschel Jones's mother, and Avo Tope is her children.
Yes.
She was elected county treasurer in 36.
And King
was commissioner of 1, Ogle 2, Gus Olson 3, and Coy Holt 4. And then sometime or other before this, Mr. G.L. Boykin was county agent.
We had a county agent to move in.
But he resigned here in May of 37.
Did they get someone else?
And J.M. Hatton, he was appointed
county agent.
County agent.
And this was the first beginnings, I guess, of county agents. It came out of, most of them were trained in Texas.
Yeah, well, way back there sometime. Sam Martin was a county agent for a while, but he never did do anything to mount anything, and so they let him go. And Pearl Locke, she was the home demonstration agent in 38.
1938. That's the first notation you have of any such office.
Yes. And in September of 38, T.D. Sansing was appointed county attorney. Then November, we had another general election.
That's in 38?
38, and Hoskins, Barkley, Hicks, Wilbanks, May Jones, and the same commissioners.
All right. Can we hurry on over now to, say, about 1944? The war was on at that time, and did we have... Well, let's go into 43. What do you have there?
Well, we redecorated the courthouse in 43, and Mr. M.E. Smith got the bid to redecorate it.
Which meant painting it, I guess.
Yes, painting the inside.
$1,700.
Mm-hmm.
That's in 43.
Yeah, and Then in 44, well, we got 2 snowplows for the county. And Joe Hatton resigned as county agent, and Zach Jaggers was employed as county agent.
County agent. All right. November we had
Another election, general election.
Who was elected then?
Well, Jack Allen for district judge.
He's from Meriton.
Yeah, McConnell, he was the district attorney. And Mr. Barkley is county judge, Hoskins clerk, T.D. Sansing, county attorney. And
I believe
the
T.D.
sheriff and everything, J.B. Cook, was elected in 44.
In 44. That's his first term. He'd been a deputy.
Oh, he'd been deputy for a long time. And then May Jones, she was the county treasurer. And Mr. Albert Jacobs, which is Jake Jacobs' daddy.
Our present postmaster.
Mm-hmm. And Ogle was the number 2, Olson and Holt.
They were the commissioners.
Yeah.
At that time.
And in December, Mr. Hoskins got him a new deputy clerk.
Paid $150 a month. And that was, who was that deputy clerk?
Well, it says KCR.
Must be Kesse Richardson. Okay. And then in 46, after the war was over,
Well, now, in
February.
46, Mr. Ogle passed away, who was the commissioner of Precinct 2. And J.E. Vernon was appointed to fill his unexpired term.
And
then pavement around the courthouse grounds, paid for. I don't know when they ordered it, but anyway, it was paid for. And in November the 12th, 46, Johnny C. Lee was service officer.
that's he had come home from the war and
Yeah.
was a service officer.
Mm-hmm.
And shortly after that, I think, was appointed county judge.
Well, we'll get to that a little later.
All right.
And, of course, in 46, we had another general election. And I guess we didn't elect a district judge. Anyway, I just got McConnell for county attorney, or district attorney. Mr. Barkley's a judge, and T.D. Sansing county attorney, and Fred Hoskins a clerk.
I believe T.D. served until in the 60s, didn't he, as
Mhm.
county attorney?
Mm-hmm.
So we're getting down into modern times, and you know we're almost out of time, so we're going to have to hurry along. The next
Well, in
change.
49, Dr. Kleberger was appointed as a health officer,
That was
and
26 years.
caused by the death of Dr. Gower.
Dr. Gower.
Now then, in October of 48, that was when Johnny Lee was appointed county judge to fill the unexpired term of Mr. Barkley.
Who had passed away.
Hmm. And A.L. Wilson, who is a son-in-law of the Baker people.
Well, why did you ask me? I could have told you.
Well,
Grays? The Grays?
No.
Well, I'm sorry.
Anyway, he was appointed county service officer in place of Johnny.
That was to take care of the veterans
Mhm.
that came back.
And canvassed the election there. Jack Allen, district judge. And that's when Bob Galloway became district attorney.
District attorney. That was in 1949, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. And
County judge, Johnny Lee.
Lee and T.D. Sansing, Hoskin, Cook, and May Jones.
They were the other county officers. And then
And then the commissioners was Jacobs, Vernon, and V.W. Renner, and Buster Schott. And Buster Schott and Renner are both alive. Now, Renner is still commissioner of Precinct 3.
November the 13th, 1950, you had another election. You canvassed the election.
Yeah, Galloway was the
District attorney.
attorney, and Judge Lee, J.B. Cook, Fred Hoskins, and May Jones, and Jimmy Lynn was county attorney. He took over
For-
after Mr. Sansing.
All right.
That's in 1950. And then Precinct 1, we changed to Norris Meek, which
Is that Janie Meek's
husband,
husband?
and Vernon Renner and Shot.
All right, and that gets us up to the 50s.
Well,
You have some notes here of just a lot of names and dates.
well,
Way back to 1890, 1889.
county judge. You want all that
I
kind
think we've covered these on the tape. You see,
Okay.
in that earlier tape. And so that gets us up to where you quit taking notes, except for these are precious notes, and they should be filed somewhere for posterity's sake sometime. But I guess, as you said, somebody can go and search the records and
They,
find them.
they can find them.
So they're there. Because, see, it's
That's
been
right.
real wonderful of you to share these notes with us that you've taken through the years. Anything before we leave that you'd like to share with
See,
us?
we got down to what?
1950.
Well, in 1950, the county officers went on a fee basis instead
Instead of a salary?
well, they were on a fee basis up until this time, and then they went on to a salary. They were on fee basis until 1950.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't make, it depended on what kind of
What kind
cases
of,
they had,
yes,
didn't we?
and the recordings, what kind of recordings they had. And
that
then they fixed the salaries for the different offices.
Do you happen to have those salaries?
Well, this was in 1950, January term. Sheriff was allowed 390.63, and the clerk was 478, I believe it is. I got a blur there. And the county treasurer, 93. County judge, 234. Well, that was the county clerk, and this is the district clerk, 185. The sheriff, 200.
That's deputy sheriff.
Deputy sheriff, yeah, 200.
And the county commissioner's
The
got
county-
187.
Yeah, and the Spearman Library, one that's down here on Main Street
Yes.
now, they were allowed $40 a month.
For the librarian.
Mm-hmm.
And that took care of the books and everything, I guess.
Yeah.
And that was in the basement of the courthouse at the time.
Mm-hmm. And 1951, they hired a cow trapper.
And we still hire them from time to time.
Yes.
I guess the cows were beginning to be a menace to the animals at that time. Because, see, it's been real great of you to share all of these past historical things with us that you've lived through most of and recorded most of them in your notes. Our guest this morning has been Kesse Richardson, and of course we are taping our broadcast as well as the tape for posterity's sake. Each tape will be filed in the library here, the Hansford Library, for use on cassettes for anyone. Tomorrow our guest is going to be Price Miller from Groover.
Oh.
You know Price?
Oh, yes.
And we hope to relive a lot of old times from over in the western part of the county as well as around here. And we appreciate very much Mrs. Clementine Renner arranging these guests for us.
Yeah.
Our program this morning has been brought to you by Baker and Taylor Drilling Company, who join us in wishing you a most pleasant day.